Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. The Matrix is a weird place, isn't it? Many of you probably heard by now, this individual played the voice of Batman, died at 66 years old. Kevin Conroy, initials KC, died 20 days before his birthday. But look at the numbers in this guy's life. Born in 55, died in 22. 5 and 2 is 7. So essentially, his life imprint is all double digits. 77. And he died at 66 years old. Now, why is this significant? Well, we've been talking all about Batman as Apollo, haven't we? We just talked about this last week. Batman is Apollo, and Apollo's number is 66. Now, we're not going to do a full decode on this individual because I want to get into today's show, which is all about Nikola Tesla and his papers discovered in a warehouse on 57th Street, just a few blocks away from Trump International Hotel at Columbus Circle. We're going to look at declassified documents from 1945, explaining where Tesla's trunk ended up in a warehouse on 57th Street. We're going to talk about Tesla technology today. His laser weapon. We're going to talk about Brookhaven National Laboratories. And so much more. This is the declassified document from October 19th, 1945. And in it, it says, it is requested that in the interest of national defense, access be given to the effects of Dr. Nikola Tesla, held in Manhattan warehouse at 57th Street, New York, New York. So, I found an old map. This is a resource, and I'll put a link to this in the pinned comment. This old map website shows Manhattan the way it looked in the 1940s. And I got chills because as I begin to pour through this map, it literally has exactly the way that Manhattan looked. Now I'm going down 57th Street here, as you can see, and everywhere you see one of these dots, you can click on this and it will show you a picture from the 1940s. Well, I looked all up and down 57th Street to try to find this warehouse. And as you can see, many of these places, here's General Outdoors. Let's look at some of these things. Let's go back to the 1940s. Let's go back to the future. Because the past is happening now, isn't it? Yellow Taxi Company. Let me read some of these things to you. Repair Shop. Some of these companies are still around. General Outdoor. Willie's Overland Company Service Station. Slauson Decker Dairy. There's a dairy down there. This is 57th Street. And I looked all along this, and I could not find the warehouse until I got down to the waterfront, which is where the warehouse would be, wouldn't it? Because at the waterfront, they're offloading goods, aren't they? And back in the 1940s, this would have been the logical place where you would put a warehouse. Here's the waterfront here. Here are the docks. This is the Swedish-American line, interestingly enough, right? And just back here, we see a large unnamed building. I clicked on the dot, and I believe this is the warehouse. Look at the numbers. 11 times 4 is 44, and 44. Now, all of these images on all of these black dots actually have some kind of number plate, identification number. And sometimes there's a guy standing next to it, holding it. And it looks super creepy. It's like you're looking at a ghost, almost. This is a completely different era in human history. One that's not really been talked about very much. But when you click on some of these storefronts, you see that the world hasn't changed very much. When we see the 1940s depicted in fiction, they always like to make it look like it was another completely different era or completely different place. But when you click on some of these things, like look at this building here. That looks like a modern building. And then you see even the names. They had beer back then. They had pubs. They had many of the same things that we have today. In fact, and we're not going to spend too much time on this today because we could be here forever looking at this map, right? Maybe we'll do like a marathon show and just go through and look at these cityscapes and storefronts. It's unbelievable. Multi-story buildings. 20, 30, 40 stories tall in the 1940s. You had all kinds of like repair shops, mechanics, many, many more than we have now. In other words, modern technology, the only difference really is computers. But all this stuff was here in the 1940s. Look, they have the American Women's Association building here. Let's go down this a little bit more. International Magazine building, Columbus Theater, General Motors building, Fisk Rubber, Goodrich Tire, which we still have. There's even a Chase Bank in here, which we still have. General Motors. Seem to be a lot of studios along 57th Street as well. Now, why are we so focused on 57th Street? Well, you're going to see in a minute. Because much of the heart of Donald Trump's empire surrounds this street. I'll show you a map of that in a second. But look at this. Lots of studios. Sherwood Studio Building. 57th Street. Lots of housing. Very vibrant area down here in Manhattan in the 1940s. Contrary to popular belief. Now, as I said, I went down this entire street. The only place where I could find a building that looked like it could have been a warehouse was down by the waterfront, just blocks away from Trump International Hotel. Now, let's take a look at 57th Street. This is it right here. Running along parallel to the short edge of Central Park. What you'll notice is the proximity to Trump International Hotel, which is here, and Trump Tower, which is here. They essentially sandwich 57th Street right between them. And down here at the end, right where my cursor is, right there, is where we just looked at that warehouse. Literally just 100 yards or more from Trump International Hotel. Now here's what makes 57th Street interesting. It is the ferrule part of the hypodermic needle that we discovered in the landscape of Manhattan. Here's the plunger of the needle. outlined by the red line. Inside the darker buildings, the central plunger shaft. Then we go to the back of the plunger and the front of the ferrule, which is where 57th Street is running, just like this. What is the ferrule of the needle? The ferrule of the needle is the tip of the spear. It's actually around the base. See if I have an image of the ferrule, the needle ferrule. And what does all this mean? Well, I'm going to explain it to you. Because what you're going to hear next, you are not going to believe. So where is the ferrule of the needle? Well, it's this little shape right here that basically keeps the needle stable. Here's the plunger, here's the needle. The ferrule is like a ring that goes around. It's a coronal ring surrounding the base of the needle right here. This is the ferrule of the needle. And something strange happens when you look at this landscape. Now let me explain this picture to you a little bit further. 57th Street runs this way. The warehouse where Tesla's trunks were stored is right here, just a block from the riverfront here. And so this area then becomes the ferrule of the needle, right? It's the top of the base here of the needle. Now, where is the needle? Casey, where is the needle? You can't just draw lines in the landscape. This is the tip of the needle right here. It starts at Central Park and it terminates at the One World Trade Freedom Tower that you can see poking out of the top right here. It is the tip of the needle, and all I did was connect it to Central Park. And here you have, to the right and the left of the ferrule of the needle, you have Trump International Hotel on your right and Trump Tower on the left, somewhere over here, surrounding 57th Street, the ring of the needle. Now here's what's crazy. Above you have the tip of the spear pointing to the Freedom Tower. But guess what? Below there is something pointing to the Freedom Tower as well. And it's another tip of the spear. Columbus Circle, the Globe Sculpture, and Trump International Hotel. And below you have the subway system. Underneath the ground, another spear pointing toward the Freedom Tower. Now, I don't know exactly where this arrow points, but it points in the general direction of the other tip. So you have an above and below. So let's get into what they tell us they found inside of Tesla's trunks. There's my ferrule tip there. Knew I had it somewhere. Metal ferrule for zero adhesive and zero interaction. This is the ring, the ferrule ring. Now here are the papers. And I went through these with the fine-tooth comb. Again, I'll link this site in the pinned comment so you guys can see this as well. But basically, they have a letter, a summary letter written by John Trump, Trump's uncle. And in this letter, they talk about all of the secret documents found inside the trunks on 57th Street. Now, what I did here is I pulled screenshots out of this so we don't have to scroll through this whole document. As you can see, it's 65 pages long. Almost 66, right? 65 pages long. So I pulled screenshots out so we can kind of focus on these documents, some of the, better parts of this document. But I can tell you this, in John Trump's own letter, which you're going to see in a second here, there are exhibits A through Q. Of course, there's exhibits A through Q, right? Now, this is John Trump, Trump's uncle. And he worked with Van de Graaff, a man named Van de Graaff. What did they work on? Radio frequency technology. Electromagnetic frequencies. In other words, the earliest forms of electromagnetic internet technology. Of course, his uncle died at 77, and we see the number 77 also all over Trump's life as well. Inaugurated when he was 7 years old, 7 months and 7 days. This was all about microwaves. Now, when I began to focus on this, I was blown away, because Trump is all about microwaves as well. 5G, 6G, and beyond. Microwave technology. Just like his uncle. No connection? I don't think so. And remember how 57th Street is at the center of all this, isn't it? 57th Street at the center of all of this. 57 is 5G microwaves. Now, let's go back to John Trump, because this is one of the very few pictures he ever took. And on his tie is a portal. A spiral portal. Now, that portal means other things, but there's something else happening here. Now, Tesla was also working on a Van de Graaff generator. Let's go to Exhibit A. This is John Trump's very letter that he released, a summary of what was in Tesla's trunk. Let me get with you guys, make sure we're connected, and we'll keep going with this. Now, looks like you guys are here. Exhibit A. Possibilities of electrostatic generators. An updated article, probably written about 1934, discussing the possibilities as a source of high voltage DC power of the Van de Graaff type of electrostatic belt generator. The article states correctly the electrostatic principles employed in this device and points out that such generators are not suitable for commercial high power applications, though of undoubted scientific value. Tesla's wireless tower, erected in 1902 on Long Island, is stated in this memorandum to have been charged to 30 million volts. Now, the tower they're talking about is called the Wardenclyffe Tower. And this Wardenclyffe Tower is in the zip code 11973, just hundreds of yards away from the future site of the particle accelerator at Brookhaven on Long Island. It's all right there in the same spot. And Trump Tower and the IBM building are two arrows, as you can see on your screen here. And we pointed these arrows to see where they pointed. And guess where they pointed? They pointed to Tesla's tower, Wardenclyffe Tower, dead straight pointed to it. I took a line, I put it there, and I put it to the tip, and it pointed to Wardenclyffe Tower. Now, let's keep going with this. Let's go to Exhibit D. Reply to Antorg something generation of high voltage in the acceleration of charged particles. A particle accelerator. Remember, Brookhaven had not been built yet. I think it was built in the 50s or 60s. Something was happening on Long Island, and Tesla was involved. This document, dated November 8, 1935, answers questions raised by Soviet engineers and scientists regarding Tesla's proposal of May 16, 1935. From this answer, it is deduced that the proposal concerned the generation of high voltages by electrostatic means. These means consisted of high voltage terminal, presumably supported on an insulating column, charged by a gaseous charge conveying medium passing between ground and terminal. The ideas contained in this memorandum are fairly similar to the belt conveyor electrostatic generator methods proposed by Van de Graaff. Do not appear to offer any unusual features. So what you're going to see in John Trump's write-up here, he's very dismissive of Tesla's research. You're going to see a pattern here. Now, this is the Van de Graaff generator. Many of you will remember this. This is the hallmark, the trademark of Tesla. He tried to basically harvest energy out of the air. That's what he was trying to do. The Van de Graaff generator. Now let's skip to Exhibit F. Because Tesla was also playing with particle acceleration before there were particle accelerators. New art of projecting concentrated non-dispersive energy through natural media. This undated document by Tesla describes an electrostatic method of producing very high voltages capable of great power. This generator is used to accelerate charged particles, presumably electrons. Are we looking at the original technology now being used by the entire world at Brookhaven, at CERN, to send these charged particles around at the speed of light? Is this the very technology? I believe it is. Let's keep reading here. Such a beam of high energy electrons passing through the air is the concentrated non-dispersive means by which energy is transmitted through natural media. As a component of this apparatus, there is described an open-ended vacuum tube within which the electrons are first accelerated. So they basically begin with a vacuum tube to begin to accelerate these electrons. Exhibit F continues here. It says the proposed scheme bears some relation to present means for producing high energy cathode rays by the cooperative use of high voltage electrostatic generator and an evacuated electron acceleration tube. It is well known, however, that such devices, while of scientific and medical interest, are incapable of the transmission of large amounts of power in non-dispersed beams over long distances. Tesla's disclosures in this memorandum would not enable the construction of workable combinations of generator and tube, even of limited power, though the general elements of such a combination are succinctly described. So again, John Trump dismisses Tesla's findings here. Do you see the pattern? Now, is all of this accident, that all this talk of particle acceleration linked to Tesla just yards away from Wardenclyffe Tower, is it an accident? I don't believe it is. Remember the zip code 11973, which is the date of the opening of the Twin Towers and the date they fell. That zip code was established long before 1973. And this brings us to Tesla's death ray. On to the next exhibit here. Now, many people surrounding Tesla's death seemed to be obsessed with this death ray. Let's read this. This exhibit consists of a series of letters to representatives of the British government. It includes a reply from the British government. These letters offer to the British government for a fee the disclosure of a means for accelerating the high energies, minute particles. Such beams would constitute a death ray capable of the protection of Great Britain from air attack. The method proposed is essentially that described in Exhibit F above. Following the initial letter dated August 23rd, 1936, the subsequent letters attempt to clear up the misunderstanding of the British representatives and to expedite their acceptance of the Tesla proposal. So, everyone's freaked out about this death ray, and everybody wants it. And that brings us to Exhibit Q, the last exhibit. An agreement dated April 20th, 1935, between Tesla and the Amtorg Trading Corporation, which Tesla agreed to supply plans, specifications, and complete information on a method and apparatus for producing high voltages up to 50 million volts, for producing very small particles in a tube open to air, for increasing the charge of the particles to full voltage of the high potential terminal, and for projecting the particles to distances of hundreds of miles or more. Maximum speed of the particles specified not less than 350 miles per second. Now, what else is going on here? Well, here's more on the death ray. And it talks about this ray being able to melt metal over the course of hundreds of miles. Fitzgerald is presently working on the perfection of Tesla's death ray, which in Fitzgerald's opinion is the only possible defense against offensive use by another nation of the atomic bomb. In this connection, it is noted that the New York Times of September 22nd, 1940, in an article entitled Science in the News, science editor states that Tesla divulged to Lawrence the fact that he had developed a death ray, or teleforce, which Tesla claimed would melt airplane motors. Would melt airplane motors at a distance of 250 miles, so that actually an invisible Chinese wall would be built around a country against attack by an enemy air force. According to the article in the Times, this electrical device would operate by the generation of power from a plant, a number of which might be located strategically along our coastlines, and the beam from which would melt any engine within a radius of 250 miles. Now, what is it about the engine of an aircraft that would melt without melting the aircraft? I believe you guys know the answer to that. Was this the weapon taken by Trump's uncle used to melt the Twin Towers? That's for you to decide. But what about an airplane engine would melt without melting the actual airplane? One of you knows the answer. I already know the answer. Here's a clue. What are the airplane engines made out of, and what is the actual airplane made out of? Let's see who gets it first. There you go. Plays in the dirt. The outside of the airplane is made out of aluminum, just like the facade of the Twin Towers. The inside of the engines is made out of steel parts. And that's why they would melt and the outside would not. And now you see the metaphor that the towers were. They were the metal inside and the aluminum on the outside, just like the airplanes that they had already experimented on and seen that they could melt the engines out of them. Wow. So, that's what I had for you guys today. And we'll be back on here tomorrow with some Between the Headlines. I also have a part 2 to the Battlestar Galactica, because Laura Roslin got cancer, but then she gets a cure. Of course she gets a cure, because Apollo makes the disease and he creates the cure. So we'll be doing a part 2 Battlestar Galactica early next week. And we'll go into the chat and see what you guys are up to. Wow. So, more proof. Putting together the evidence, the proximity of Trump's central empire around Tesla's papers, his tower pointing toward a cliff tower. You can't make any of this up. All anyone needed to do was look. But very few people want to look because they're in the right-left paradigm. And everyone's freaked out because Biden's the president and they're not looking at Trump anymore. Never really were. They don't want to give up any ground to the left because it's the right-left paradigm, isn't it? That's why you can't put metal into a microwave. Exactly, Snowball. Wonder if you can put aluminum into a microwave. You probably can, can't you? And at high enough frequency, that